Hello, listeners, and welcome once again to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by leadership writer, coach, speaker, facilitator, and consultant, Ron Ross. So really grateful that he's got up so early to talk to us today, and it's going to be a really interesting conversation. We're going to talk about all kinds of leadership things, as well as his experiences of business, and we'll hear a bit about his new book.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
So I'm joined today from the States, very early in the day for him as well, by an excellent guest, Ron Ross. So Ron, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, I appreciate being here. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Likewise. And to kick us off, I'm going to hand everything over to you and ask you to give the listeners a bit of an introduction, tell us a bit about your background and what you get up to today.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So my name is Ron Ross. I am a writer. So just finished a book called Inspire Me. I am a speaker, but where I spend a lot of my time is really coaching and consulting, working with small to medium-sized organizations, everything from startups. We do a lot in healthcare. It's not that that's only our only niche, but it seems to find us, and my partner and I, we enjoy that. So I've been in business for myself for this is going in my 8th year. And this is my 2nd year with my partner and wife being a part of it. So, which is really going well. So she brings a different skill set where I focus a lot on team development, leadership development. She focuses on some of the traditional HR things, and she also, both of us focus on organizational and team culture as well. So
you started with writer, which I thought was interesting. So tell us a bit about some of the things you've written.
Yeah, I mean, like the book that I have coming out in just 2 weeks is called Inspire Me, and it's really about the work that I've been doing over the last 3 or 4 years with organizations. It's the attitudes and mindsets of leaders, in my opinion, aren't keeping up with the fast-pacing change of what employees are looking for. So, so the book was all about how do I help like leaders and organizations, particularly those who are responsible for hiring, coaching, mentoring those unit leaders. Like, here's what I've seen. I'm a curious guy, so I like to dig into what's the research. What are the evidence-based practices? And then I try to bump that up against, like, is what they're saying practical? Have I been able to apply that? What does my experience teach me? So the book is really an amalgamation of sort of those practices. And the question is trying to answer is, what do employees need to feel inspired? AKA, what's going to make them want to lean in, stay with your organization, to give sort of referrals to other employees, and to satisfy your client. So that's what the book is about in a nutshell.
It's very topical, and it's an area I'm really interested in, I must say as well. So, and it actually leads us really well into the next question as well, I think. So, I mean, what do you think business owners and leaders should be thinking about? What should they know about this changing mindset of the workforce today?
I think as I think about it, I'm not sure how old you are, David, but, for me, I'm not a baby boomer, but I'm close enough to be able to understand them. So I know when I think about sort of my parents' generation, work was what you did to take care of your family. My generation was a bit of that, but also like we wanted to do work that, if we could enjoy it, but not as necessary. I think, the next generation, it's about doing work that matters, that has an impact on the community, society, and making sure that the work is challenging, fulfilling, which is a different dynamic. I think if you have still people who are in the workforce like me, who maybe have a different way that they were raised in their career, and then you contrast that to other employees who have higher expectations for organizations. They have higher expectations for their leaders. Essentially, if I had to boil it down, is they want you to care about the community, care about the environment, care about them. And you have to be able to do that while still being able to execute on whatever the mission is for your organization or your unit, which is a tough thing. But I think, with the right mindset, the right coaching, mentorship, it's definitely doable for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the starkest demonstrations of that difference is in the amount of time people now spend in a given job. So it used to be the boomer generation or my parents' generation, you stay in that company for decades, whereas now it's years, if that. And that, I think, is perhaps one of the most visible differences, isn't
That's
it?
That's really spot on. And there, I think recruiters and companies recognize it used to be if you moved around too often, you were labeled. He's a job hopper. Now the person's considered smart. They're getting different experiences and they're coming in with new perspectives and different ways of solving problems. So it's an admired skill today, where it was something that was really held against you. So I love that call out.
Yeah, and it makes logical sense as well, doesn't it? Because the more different environments you're exposing yourself to, the more potential skills you're going to pick up. And I don't know, I'm biased maybe.
Me either. I've had a lot of different experiences and I always kind of went my own way. But I truly do think, like, when you can borrow from the best of different experiences, it makes you a better employee. I love it when employees or leaders borrow from disciplines and not their own. So if they're in the service industry and they can borrow something from sort of the art industry or sports, that's better. It just oftentimes it solves a problem that, someone else has figured out. And I think if we can be curious and we bring people with that different problem solving skills that are diverse, I think it just makes the organization experience better. And I think what the research shows is when you have that level of diversity in thought, level of diversity and the makeup, whether it's gender, race, they outperform their peers. So it not only makes sense, but actually it's a winning formula as well.
Well, it's good to know the science backs it up as well, and it's not just an assumption.
Not at all.
It feels like one of those things where you just, this makes sense to me, therefore it's fact, sort of.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're all like that, right?
Yeah, indeed. You mentioned hiring, which is obviously a big part of this kind of change, really, isn't it? So what attributes should people look for when they're hiring or promoting someone to perhaps a team leader role or their first step up that ladder?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is you can train someone to do any skill. And here's what happens most of the time. We promote people who are the best individual contributor. Makes sense. I think what we need to get better at is, does that person have that mindset where they know that the role is not just about being a super individual contributor where you're going to micromanage other people's work, that you are someone who has a mindset that I want to collaborate with you. I have a mindset that I want to help develop people. I think those are the things that you need to look for. I would call it sort of, if I had to put a big umbrella on it, sort of that inclusive mindset. I'm willing to share in some of the challenges so I can pick your brain because you're closer to the problem. And if I include you and if I give you some of the decisions, some of the angst, we're going to come up with a better solution. Those leaders who want to do it all themselves, that's a red flag. You just can't. I'm of the mindset that the team is going to outperform the strongest individual every time. It may take a little bit of time, but over the long run, they're going to outperform that super individual who's trying to do it all himself or herself.
I agree completely. Yeah. I mean, even if you get like the most super powered individual, at a certain point, they're just going to fall over from exhaustion, aren't they? Trying to do it all by themselves.
Yeah. And I think you're hitting on it. It's like, we have to understand that not only we can, but the expectation of the folks who are coming into organizations is they want a voice, they want a seat, and it's reasonable. It's reasonable. Oftentimes they're leaving not because of the dollar or two more or the raise. It's because they want to do work where they feel like they can contribute more. And when you're holding on to all the decision, when you're making, have all the information and you're not sharing, you're not including them, people are frustrated. And you really don't get the best for your unit or for your organization when you do that. Absolutely.
And so what advice would you give to a manager then who's looking to improve employee engagement?
Simple. The question that I try to answer in my book is employees today want to be inspired. They want to know that you really care. So the biggest way to do that is a couple different things, is to include them, to listen. So I think about it as the dashboard of a car. Here in the States, everyone has their own car. It's got to be mine. And, so, a lot of the new cars, whether it's an electric car, we have the fancy dashboards and you can see your climate control. You can see your speed, direction. I think today's leaders have to be able to look at sort of what's happening in the vehicle. Are my passengers happy? Is it the right temperature? Do you have the right seat? Those are the employees. But then you also need to know where you're going. And you have to be able to, obey the traffic law. So the regulations of your organization, of the government bodies. And you can't just do one. You got to be able to control the vehicle, get there efficiently, on time, but you also have to be paying attention to what's happening in your car. And I think that's the metaphor, for what modern leadership needs to look like. Before it was like, get there faster. Let's save on gas. Let's just make people hot. It doesn't matter. Can they do it? Do more. Today's employees, they want to buy that. They'll leave, they'll go somewhere else. They'll, lambaste you on places like Glassdoor, rightfully so. If you're a crappy employer, sometimes I think people do that out of revenge. That's a whole different story, but that's the consequences of the modern work. Is not only do people want a voice, if you don't give them a voice, they'll leave, they'll express their voice in a way you didn't want to. So you have to pay attention to both the employee and also sort of what the chief responsibility is for your unit.
Yeah, the Glassdoor one's a funny one, I must say. I don't know. I think maybe sometimes it is revenge, but then the question to me is still, why do they feel the need to get revenge? Like, what have you done?
Yeah, no, here's the realities. People will speak. It's like water. Like water is going to find a level where it can flow. People are going to find a place where they can express their voice. So if it's in the break room, if people still have those in organizations, or it's on some forum like Glassdoor, or better yet, it's in a team meeting where you actually have a good process, where you're actually listening to folks and you can actually repeat what they say and you can tell them why. I love that idea. Here's why we're not going to do it. But keep the ideas flowing. So people are going to express themselves. It's just a matter of where and what you want to increase engagement, to increase innovation, is you want your employees expressing themselves where you can do something about it, which is in your team meetings, which is in your town halls, within your organizational walls, virtually or physically. So I think you're right. People do it not because they're malicious. I would say probably 97% of the people, but then is there the 3% that they're just out for some revenge. Not that I've personally experienced it, but I'm just surmising.
There's always the bad apples, isn't there? There's not much to do.
Absolutely right. But, absolutely right.
Yeah, I completely agree with you about it. You want it to be somewhere where you can do something about it, don't you? And I think it reminds me of that metaphor or cliche, the thing of beware the day that your most vocal employee stops talking.
Oh, yeah. I
can't remember who said it, but anyway,
that's a beautiful one. I haven't quite heard that here, but I'm taking that, moving that forward. I also say a lot of people take this mindset. Hey, I asked them, why didn't they speak up? A lot of it has to do with the changing mindsets that we've been talking about. It was like, a lot baby boomers, they didn't get asked. Maybe they didn't even ask. And it's like, if someone asked you, well, that's a privilege. You should speak up. I spoke up. And the reality is there's a dynamic that leaders have to understand. Like, for example, one of the ones that I learned is the magic of 4. You have 4 people in a meeting, in a session. Chances are 4 people are going to speak up. You have 8 people, 4 people are going to speak up. It really doesn't get beyond that 4 where people feel comfortable. So you have to design for safety, design for a way where your most sort of introspective, quiet person feels safe to speak up. Just saying, hey, I gave you an opportunity, you should have spoke, is not good enough. So design, having processes, and just understanding sort of like human nature is really what modern leaders, particularly team leaders, have to understand. So kind of going back to your question is making sure you have a mechanism, if you are managing multiple teams, to really train, to monitor what's happening sort of at that micro level, because that's really where the focal point, that's the real experience for employees today.
Yes. Yeah, I like it. And it speaks to this kind of need to be flexible as well. And I think a lot of particularly management practices and management training are all about making things process driven and the administrative and the, copy and paste sort of approach. But actually, when you're dealing with the more leadership side, the people first kind of approach, every person is different. You can't apply that same approach to every single member of your team. It just doesn't work for all of the reasons that you just said.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. And then you add to it sort of the way work is being done. Like you and I are talking across time zones virtually through the magic of technology. You have a whole set of employees that are being hired who never really spend more than a couple of days physically with their team. That was unheard of, when I started working. So, but you have a generation of people who are used to that. A lot of it had to do with the pandemic and organizations realizing, hey, this can work. I don't have to source talent from my local area. I can get talent from across the states, or I can reach into other countries and get top talent, and I can make it work. What it requires, though, is flexibility, like you said, from leaders. Now, how do you do that? Bop in the office with the coffee to have the chit chat that's informal. Now you have to be flexible in how you do it. You have to be respectful in how you do it. But it requires something different based on sort of where the person is, the time zone they're working in, and then what do they like? And what are you strong in? So you couldn't nail it more. That agility and flexibility is absolutely key. And, tops of organizations hate it because people want to measure everything. And in people, I think there should be metrics, things like employee engagement. I think it should be measured. I think it needs to be measured a little bit, more than quarterly. There needs to be sort of more intuitive measures, but it's not the same as manufacturing. It's not the same as sales and accounting. To your point, people are so individualistic. So I think leaders at all levels need to understand you can't quite put people in a box and measure sort of efficiency just by just strict numbers.
I think something else that this kind of shift to remote, whether we're going back again or not, I don't know, but I think it made that need for the informal communication. It made it A, more of a priority, but B, I think it meant leaders had to be more conscious about doing it. And I think that really played into the hands, actually, of the more introverted managers, because a lot of them were probably being more conscious about it anyway, because they had to be by their nature, sort of thing. Whereas the extroverts could sort of rely on just being able to walk into a room and just wing it.
I love that. I love that perspective. My wife and I often talk about like the difference. She's an introvert. I'm an extrovert. And I think both leadership styles have strengths, but what I like about what you're saying is it does require now virtual work, hybrid work, 4-day work weeks, more intentionality. Independent of what your style is, you can't just rely on that. I'm going to run into that person as I'm going to get my coffee. We'll all have it at time to kibitz before our meeting. What's happening is people are focused on the work And really what we need to dial up more is that informal touch point that makes people feel seen, heard, and respected. And it's not going to happen by accident. You have to design for it. You have to plan for it. And I think there's some leaders doing great things, just like a pop in, like, hey, I'm going to call you and just check on you. I don't need anything, particularly if it's a skip level. I just want to know how things are going. What can I do to better support you? Those are great examples of leaders who kind of get what we're talking about, and are not relying and not allowing sort of distance and virtual work to be an excuse to lean in and really, stay connected with their employee population.
Another idea that I've not seen it in practice, but I've heard about it a few times, is this idea of having like a always on or a 2 or 3 hours at a time Zoom session where everyone just logs in and then just carries on with their work, as a way of trying to replicate that informal.
Yeah. I've seen it. I'm a fan of it.
Yeah.
If it's working, I think, I think the big thing I would say, like the takeaway for a lot of like what we've been saying is it's going to continue to evolve. What employees need are going to change. The litmus test of whether it's working is the people that you're trying to impact. So if that's working, keep doing it. If it's just an idea that you read about, but your employees hate it, you're not getting anything out of it, stop doing it. And the way to find out is to ask the question, like, here is the intention. Now are we getting what we need from that? And I think we don't do enough of that, asking, to your point, not the loud employee like me who's not afraid to talk, but the employee who's more thoughtful and let me evaluate it. Give me a week. I'll give you my real opinion. That's who we need to hear from as well as the person who's like, no, I like it. It's good. I get to talk out loud and people are hearing me. Well, that's good. That's good for you, Ron. But what about for Sarah, who likes a little bit more quiet and she doesn't like, having that interruption. One of the things I'm not only an extrovert, which is one thing, but I'm also the neurodivergent, which means I get distracted easily. So the whole open workspace always thought it was a horrible idea. Like, who thought of this? It's like, we're just going to have everybody interrupting everybody. So people like me can't do any work. So the point is, like, the great ideas that are put in magazines, if they're not working for people, pitch them, get rid of them. I'm on my soapbox a little bit. Sorry about that.
No, I think you're right. I do. And I think, you can apply that to all of this though, can't you? I think, remote working, it's not for everyone, but if it works for your company, great, keep doing it. If it doesn't, look at something else. Maybe try hybrid, maybe test the waters with the team, see if they want to go back to an office or whatever. And I think, we all fall into this trap, don't we? It's almost becoming polarizing, isn't it? Of I'm fully remote, or I want to be in the office, and there's no in between, or there's no room for maneuver. But actually, it's flexibility. If it works for individuals, great. If it works for the team, even better. If it means the company is still going to achieve its success, perfect. You've done it. Well done. But
yeah. I think you nailed it. I think had you wrote my book, it would have been shorter.
You get paid by the word, though, don't you? So you probably wouldn't want
flexibility.
that.
I like it. I'm like, you're spot on, though. To me, like, where the focal point is really at that team level. So it's like what works for the majority of the team to be like, to keep people engaged, give them a good experience, and just as important, to get the work of the unit done. Whether it's more innovation, whether it's more efficiency, and it's at that unit level that really people experience. Whatever company that you own, that you're leading in, it's not at the big level. You may have the best CEO, the best leader, a amazing corporate culture. But if at that micro level, like we're talking about, if the people aren't getting what they need from the leader, if they feel like, hey, this is cookie cutter, then your company stinks from their perspective, because we're talking to less and less people. So although we're more connected than ever before, the experience, because of hybrid work and this virtual work environment, people are actually talking to less and less people. So that small unit is really where the emphasis needs to be. And you have to be flexible within there to understand what your employees need. So,
yeah, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought of that. But just the number of people you're going to interact with on a daily basis, it's going to be much lower, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. So you need to make sure that the folks at that team unit level are trained, have the right mindsets. And you have to have a way to not like 1984 hover over them, but you do need to make sure they're actually skilled at, what they're doing, that they're having the types of conversations that are inclusive to the introvert, as we've talked about, that sort of the culture that they're setting in their unit is not like Mars and your Venus. It has to be in the same orbit, same planetary system at least. And that requires not only skill at that individual unit level, but at that multi-division, multi-department leader level. They have to be good at making sure that I'm not only allowing people to manage up and tell me what's happening, I can see for myself. I'm having conversations. I'm spot checking, not to just watch you, but if they feel more comfortable sharing the experience with me because I'm at a different level, now I can coach you. I can help you how to do it better.
Yeah. And it's getting that consistency, isn't it? Because as you said at the start there, you might have the best CEO, the best leader and great culture, but if it's not in every individual team as well, consistency is king.
Yeah. Yeah, I can give you examples. Like my daughter was telling me about it. She worked for a company at the top. We believe in workplace flexibility, and we have 4-day summer hours, all sorts of great stuff. But the folks at the individual management level were like, basically, forget all of that. You need to be online, even though it's your quote unquote day off, and checking in. I'm like, well, that's not really off if you're required to be at your computer and you're giving your mental, emotional energy to your job. So it's a case where at the top, they're saying one thing, but the folks who are leading from a different generation weren't quite embracing that. And I'm not saying it's just a generational issue. It is a making sure, I would say less than consistency, but making sure that there is is integrity. If we're saying this is how we are as an organization, there needs to be integrity at really different levels of that, organization. So
it makes me wonder if maybe the targets that those managers were being given, they felt the best or only way to meet them was to be that way. And then perhaps nobody's realized that what that's doing is creating a disconnect between kind of the boots on the ground perception versus what the stated purpose and values are.
I think the pressure that's put on leaders has a good bit to do with it, but I also think it's unchallenged mindsets as well. So I'm looking at your background, sort of leading with integrity, training and mentoring. It's like we grow up with leaders, just the way it is, who are from a different era, a lot of us. And we can't help but take some of that into sort of today. And if we're not challenging, this was good for then, is this good for now? And there needs to be a constant renewal of is this practice? Does it serve me as a leader? Does it serve my employees? And if it's not, I need to let it go. And to me, that's at the heart of really what good leadership is about, is that reflection, really looking at what's working. And the litmus test, to your point, is, are you getting the results that you want in terms of engagement? Are you getting the results in terms of retaining top employees? Are you getting the bottom line results that you need? I know from a research perspective, people who, work under inclusive leadership, who feel like they belong to an organization, that unit is going to outperform their peers by 30 to 40%. We know that, for sure. And yet there are leaders who make people feel ostracized, not because they're bad people. It's just because they're carrying bad practices and they have not let go, or they're not being monitored on their leadership. They're just being monitored on sort of bottom line results. And while you may be able to get that in the short term, I think you mentioned that, in the long term, it'll be found out. Glassdoor, bad employee satisfaction survey, the numbers will catch up, I think, in the long run when you're not treating employees well.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. If only because you treat the employees bad, they'll leave. And then the cost associated with replacing them. And then if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, you've spent way, way, way more money than you should have. And
right.
You've lost all of that knowledge, all that expertise. You've probably had to retrain people as well. And it's just no way to do it. No way to run a business.
Yeah. You and I are right. And most leaders aren't bad, but I think what we're saying too is you can't afford to be middle of the road if you want to attract, retain top employees. They're leveling up their expectations. And I think what we're saying in this conversation today is us collectively as leaders, whether you're coaching leaders, whether you're writing about leaders, whether you're leading, you're coaching other leaders, you got to level up. We have to level up collectively as well.
Are you a new leader, or do you aspire to be one? Do you want to take your skills to the next level and join a community of like-minded professionals? If so, then check out Integrity Leaders, our exclusive leadership program that offers you access to an online community platform and app, group virtual sessions on leadership once a month, as well as Q&As and access to a few top resources. You'll also get early access to our weekly podcast episodes. By joining Integrity Leaders, not only will you be able to enhance your own leadership abilities and make yourself a better manager, but you'll also be supporting this podcast and helping to keep it free for everyone. So visit the website today. It's www.leadernotaboss.com and start your journey towards becoming an exceptional leader. Let's get back to this episode.
And we have to learn from what works. So, we have this franchise here. I don't know if they're where you are. You guys have Chick-fil-A where you are? They sell fried chicken sandwiches. And that's it. It's a Southern-based company that's kind of spread really all throughout the United States. And, there's some values that are questionable, but there's some values that are really great. They have really great customer service. And one of the things that they learn is unit operators and franchise owners, they innovate and then they share those innovations with other franchise owners. And it's all about how do we get people through the drive-through during our peak times the best way. And it started off with a couple of the unit folks figuring it out. They have people outside taking the orders and giving them the right devices. And now it's become standard practice. And I think that's what we need to do as leaders is what's working? What can I try? And then let me be generous and share it with other folks to say, here's what's working for me. You may want to try this in your group or your unit.
Yeah.
I'm not selling. I have no stake in Chick-fil-A. So I don't know where that one came from.
You've got loads of shares in it. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I'm not selling chicken sandwiches on this podcast.
Oh, you're making me hungry now as well. Yeah. Anyway.
Me too. I'm not eating breakfast and you're at lunchtime. So we're both at the eating hour. So.
Yeah. Bad planning.
Very bad planning. Bad analogy, Ron. Bad analogy.
Okay. Well, moving on then. So I think one of the things that we've kind of hinted on already really is for a lot of leaders and business owners, particularly during these uncertain times we've been facing of late, the bottom line results are becoming perhaps more important. But at the same time, as we've always just been discussing, really, you've still got to keep that great environment, haven't you, for your employees? So how do you balance those two things? Because they are in a lot of cases, they're competing demands, aren't they? So
yeah, they can feel competing. I'm going to go back to the car analogy. I think, you have two systems that you need to pay attention to as a modern leader is what is the morale, the employee health of my team feeling like? And there are hard numbers like employee satisfaction numbers, but they're also, you have to be skilled at noticing. And if you're too meeting and you can't lift your head up to notice, like the communication is a little bit sharp, it's a little bit too on the edge. Things are going well. I need to, stop, do what I call a renewal ritual where you're just allowing people to reconnect to each other, allowing people to remember why the work matters. So you have to do that periodically through the year, which is taking care of the internal temperature, morale of your team. But you also have to keep your eyes on what the mission is you have a destination to get to as a unit leader, and you have to figure out the best way to get there to conserve the most amount of fuel while keeping these people happy. And it's not an either or. You really have to do both. And I'm a big fan of training, mentoring, as I know you are, but also you have to have the processes in place to do it. So a lot of what I talk about in my book is like, there are certain processes that work. It's like a simple one. It's like, you want to make sure everybody feels heard. Well, just don't throw out a question and think everybody's going to speak. Like, if it's important, give people time to think about it. It allows those introverts, those processors to think about it, to have a couple of days to chew on it, and then they can come prepared. Or like, hey, here's a question we're going to answer. I'm going to give everybody a couple of minutes just to think about it. Write your answers down. You're allowing process to level the playing field. If you don't do it, your extroverts, your dominant personalities are going to speak. You as a leader are going to feel good. Hey, I've heard a couple things. They like my idea. And they're people that have really great, either better ideas or like there are things you haven't thought about that you're going to miss. So I think you have to pay attention to both. And then you have to use process, train people to really do it. No one's born learning how to lead at the level that we're talking about. It's the skill that we have to keep training people to do, upskilling. And as things are changing, as expectations are changing, it's becoming harder, not easier. So if you're an athlete, particularly whether it's, your football or soccer, as we call it, or my football, it's about preparing people to do the job. And I think we don't do that as much within organizations. We're like, okay, you got promoted. I sent you to a class. You're good for the next 10 years. No, no.
So. Yeah. And actually going back to what you were saying earlier, where we tend to promote the best solo practitioners, I really believe very strongly, I have zero illusions this is ever going to happen, but I very strongly believe that you should be trained to be a leader and a manager before you get the job to be a leader and a manager. Yeah. So if you think about any other profession, and I'm always on my soapbox about this, but I mean, you wouldn't expect a doctor to learn by doing, would you? You wouldn't throw a lawyer into a courtroom without training.
I'm with you. I am with you. I'm on your platform. I'm with you 100%. Tom Brady, who is a quarterback who retired, he got paid $35 million to be an analyst, and he had enough sense to say, I am not ready to do this job. I need a year to train. And they're paying him. I'm like, brilliant. It's a great example of, if I want to do it, I want to do it right. You have a responsibility to train me if you want the best of me. So I'm with you 100%. I don't think it'll happen. Even a little bit more training preparation. I like the apprentice model. And what I mean by that is there's so much you could learn by including that person that you think can be your successor, that person you think could move to the next level. Start inviting her to some of the meetings. Start sharing your thought process. Here, I have to do this. I'm not requiring you, but I think I want you to understand sort of what it looks like. So shadow, delegate. It's that model that if we do that earlier, when we promote people, they are more ready now to do the job because we've invested in them way before we gave them the responsibility. So I'm in agreement with you. So
yeah, not just before, but then at regular intervals, as you say. There's no good saying, right, you're done for 10 years.
Yeah. Can you imagine like a soccer team that doesn't practice? They're not doing their conditioning. And that's what we're expecting leaders to do is like, hey, you took that workshop like when you got promoted. We're going to do one at the end of next year. And then you're 52 weeks. Maybe you get like a month off. Here, we don't even believe in vacation. We're like 2 weeks and you're good. You're good for a whole year. You guys at least do holiday. We're like, no, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. And you're supposed to be sharp enough, trained enough to meet the modern expectations. And it's just not enough. We're not doing enough training preparation. We're not giving people enough breaks to be fresh. Sounds like you and I agree. We could talk about this forever. So we're on the same page. So
yeah, I mean, it reminds me of the lifelong learner. Nobody should ever get to a point in their life where they think, I've learned everything I need to learn. That's it now. I'm done.
Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement with you. And like how you learn, how I learn doesn't have to be the same. I love the format that you have. Podcasts. A lot of people are consuming and learning through this medium. That works for people. Books works for certain people. Formal training works for certain people. There's a whole list of what you could do. And we have to give what I call a dealer's choice to our employees so that they can figure out what needs to be done. But we have to encourage that. We have to set the system in place so they can get the training that they need for sure.
Yes. I'm not even against like on the job, learn by doing training, but the proviso is that it's properly facilitated and that there is an actual trainer or mentor there. Because in a lot of companies, certainly ones where I've worked, on the job training in inverted commas means you get the job and then we're going to ignore you and you've got to figure it out on your own.
Well, that's here too. that translates to both sides of the pond. It truly does. A lot of times is like we drop you in the water, you either swim or we'll pull the body out.
Yeah, and if we have to pull the body out, it was your fault. But if we don't, it was because of us.
Your last day.
Yeah. What a lovely analogy. Yeah.
I know, horrible. We should go back to chicken.
Yeah, I normally say sink or swim, but you took that a step further with actually.
I know, I did make it more of it.
What's then the biggest leadership lesson that you've learned from everything you've done in your career so far?
I think the biggest lesson that I've learned is like you have to, and I'm going to give my elder brother credit for this. He rose to the level. He was in law enforcement and he was able to retire as a police commissioner. And one of the things he shared with me is like, you always have like multiple constituents. And I think that's the thing that like I've learned, like you have to take care of the people in the car. So that's one constituent group. And then the people who hired you to be manager, leader, you have to take care of them as well. So you can't just be about one thing. And I think that's the biggest lesson that I've learned is you always have to be thinking, how does this impact all of my constituent groups? And for a lot of people, it's shareholders, it's the internal employees, managers. You have to make sure all those people, are happy. And for me, it requires you to have really excellent communication skills. And I believe we just don't train leaders enough how to do that. Once again, it's like you took that speech course in uni and you're good. And we put you through one here and like everything you need to do as a leader, no, it's one of the most important skills, how you message things, why we're doing this initiative, how you listen to people and pull them into conversation. No one is born knowing how to do that. And I think it's just knowing that you have multiple people who need to keep happy, and how you communicate up the chain is different than how you communicate to the people who are in the trenches doing the work. Those are different skill sets.
I really like the use of the word constituent as well, actually, because most of the time, well, maybe it's my project management hat, but I would think of that as stakeholders. But I don't actually like the word stakeholders. It's quite impersonal, and there's no kind of, you know what I mean? Whereas constituent, that implies that you're representing them and their interests. And I like that.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. I'll give my brother Rich Ross credit for that one. And I've taken it and ran with it because it does reply that you've responsibility to that group, you know, in a very real way. There's representation. So
yeah, that's good. From the other direction, then, what do you think is the biggest mistake that a leader can make?
I think I'm going to just steal what you said. I think failing to learn, stop learning, because that's the root of all, I think, mistakes. And whether it's, I'm not asking the people. So you talked about project management. The graveyard of projects that have failed is because we didn't ask people who did the job what they thought. And we did it all at the top and with the consultants and, the vendors, and we've decided, and they poo-pooed it. And therefore they went back to what they always did, because we didn't learn from the people we needed to learn from. So that's just one example. We're not learning sort of modern practices in our leadership. So it's all about, we stop learning, and we're so focused on just results. And I think if we're learning, we can at least shortcut some of those mistakes. We can reduce some of the friction. We're still going to have some of it, but I think that's the biggest mistake. Not that I make a living teaching people or coaching people, because I do, but I truly do believe that's the big mistake that leaders make.
And I think using the word learning is the interesting bit as well, because it's not the same as just going on a course, because that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to learn anything, does it? But to actually learn, you have to be self-aware, reflective. You've got to have an open mind. You've got to be open to learning. And I think that is a whole mindset that, outside of just taking on new skills and knowledge, is really useful for good leadership, because it means you're more likely to do the things that you're talking about. You're more likely to ask the right people the right questions. You're more likely to listen to the answer and then let that affect what you do next.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We need to make sure, when we are teaching people, we give them a good sense of what it feels like to actually do that. And we have some exciting things, with, artificial intelligence, virtual reality. But nothing takes the place of allowing people to be in that jump seat, to lead that meeting, now to apply what they've learned in the class. They don't have to lead the whole meeting, but they lead a segment. And what did you do well? Let's talk about what you did well. What would you do different? Nothing takes the place of that.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to change direction again with this next question. It's a little bit of a personal question, actually. We'll see. What has been your own best experience of being led?
I would say it's leaders who gave me an opportunity to do things that maybe I didn't think I was capable of doing. I think about, if I had to translate it, is first of all, the skill of noticing. They have to see you and what you're capable of. In psychology, they have this thing called the Johari's window, where we all have a blind spot, things that we don't see about ourselves. In a car, cars have now this technology to let you know someone's in your blind spot. I think the best leaders in my life have been those leaders that have been able to tell me either those blind spots, hey, you're going to hit something if you're not careful, or you have an incredible talent that I'm not sure you're aware of, and I'm willing to invest in you. Like someone sending me to a trainer, and I don't know that why I'm there. That's someone saying, hey, you have some skill. It would have been better if hey, I'm sending you to a trainer because you are really someone that I believe could help us teach other employees. So it's been that noticing me, being willing to invest in me, or being willing to correct me, or to helped me to get out of my own way. Those have been some of my best experiences.
It's one of those things that's really hard to do as a leader, though, isn't it? And it's making people feel heard and seen.
Yeah. It requires you to be noticing and seeing, which means you can't be a prisoner in your office. And in our virtual world, you have to get more creative doing that. It may be that you are creating an opportunity to watch an employee without them knowing that you're watching them, without feeling creepy about it. And that's like the flexibility that we've been talking about that leaders need to have, or else you really don't know. You're relying on just data to tell you the story. And I think the story of what employees are capable of are more than just what shows up in HRIS system or spreadsheet.
Yeah, and I think this is why I swing back and forth on in-person office versus remote, but also the type of in-person office. Because as someone trying to do some work, I hate open offices. Like they used to be exactly the same as you. Like just used to do my head in. All the noise everywhere, people talking, phone calls going on, and you're trying to write a report, and it's just didn't work. But at the same time, there's massive value in being able to sit physically with your team and hear what they're talking about and participate and get to know each other and all of those lovely things that build teamwork. So I swing back and forth on it. I really do. I can't make my mind up.
Yeah, I'm of the mindset I prefer to be with people at certain points of time. I think if you understand the principle and you know what to look for, we can take that into the virtual world quite nicely. Like giving examples, like paying attention to who's talking and who's not talking and why is a skill set all leaders need, which requires you to not be the one doing all the talking. So when I was getting my master's degree, I had to do an exercise and record yourself and pay attention to sort of, are you doing partnering statements? Who's doing what? It was a great way to figure out what's happening in teams. I was horrified that, I heard one voice consistently. It was mine. How can I be paying attention to others' contribution if I'm over dominating? And I think the moral to the story is there are ways to do everything that you need to do to make people feel connected virtually. And it may mean that you get together and you spend money that you're saving for office rental and you do some of the team dinners and you break bread together, because I don't think nothing takes the place of that, but you still have to find ways to connect virtually. But you need to know what to look for sure.
I guess that's why I normally end up looking at hybrid as the way forward, because then you can mix and match, you can get the best of both and hopefully the worst of neither.
Yeah, I'm a fan of hybrid. I've been doing, some things where helping leaders to figure out sort of the health of their team. And real quickly, there is a marital researcher by the name of John Gottman, and he was able to show that couples, he could predict couples that were going to stay together within a 92% accuracy based on a 10 to 15 minute slice of data in a lab, by giving them a conversation to interact on. Typically it was something they typically fought about. And what he found, it's not whether you fight, it's how you fight. And there have been some brilliant researchers have done that with teams. And the same thing is true in the virtual world. Is if you are focusing on the right things, there is data that tells you this team is a strong team, this team is not a strong team. And then you need to know what how to have some interventions that can get your team back to health. And I think it's true in person. It's just harder virtually. So I'm like, yeah, that's stay in sort of the hybrid world. I'm not giving up on virtual. It's harder, but I believe there are ways that we can extrapolate that same type of information in the hybrid and virtual world as well.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I'd like to believe it anyway.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, just being purely mercenary about it as a business owner, if I start taking on employees, I don't want to incur the cost of an office.
Yeah, that's a really great point.
Yeah, really point. It's oftentimes the most expensive thing a business has, apart from the staff. So
absolutely right.
Yeah,
absolutely right.
Not that it's all about the money. It's all about the people.
That's important. It helps to do good. When you have the margin and the money, it allows you to do, the other things that I think a lot of entrepreneurs want to do. Most of us don't get into business just to enrich ourselves. It's a greater purpose for it, and we want money. So,
well, the money enables the purpose, doesn't it?
It's true. Even if the purpose is to lavish myself with great things, you got to have a purpose.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Okay. What then? Next question. What would you do differently, if anything, if you were to start your career over again?
I would say I would invest in my communication skills from the very beginning. I consider myself a good communicator, if not very good. I would have poured more gasoline on that skill set in a good way to accelerate that. Learn how to have better one-on-one conversations, learn how to manage and talk to people at a higher level, learn how to facilitate group conversations, learn how to talk to 15 people in a presentation. Can I do that with 100? How about 5,000? It is the difference maker, I think, for me. And if I had to learn that earlier, I would have been better off. And it's the same thing I say with leaders, is like, invest in your leaders at all levels, their communication skills. If they do that well, then they can inspire people. Engagement's going to go up. Your projects are going to go better. Like, that's the skill set. All the other ideas, they have to squeeze through the filter of like the conduit of communication. And if folks don't do that well, if you're not uptraining, upskilling people, if they're not uptraining, upskilling themselves, it's the reason we have more friction in sort of like our initiatives and projects, in my mind. It's the reason that I struggled early on. And when I do struggle, I can connect it to a lot of times my communication or failure to listen, as my wife tells me sometimes. So,
well, listening is more than half of communication in my book. I think it's more like 75%.
Yeah,
at least.
I agree. Being able to ask the right questions and really listen and really like go after like the goal, what's being said, what's not being said that you're picking up on. So what I call that level 3 listening is you're just constantly scanning the environment for stuff. Like, I could do it in my professional environment because that's what I get paid to do. I get a little lax in my personal life, and it's bit me, and I've gotten feedback. so I would say do it in all my life. Communicate better in every area of my life. So
yeah, I think we've all made that mistake.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Leadership Heroes.
This is the question that I ask every guest, and I never mess with it. I don't modify it because I think that would be unfair. So I call it Leadership Heroes. And the question is, if you had to pick a person, one person, alive or dead, past, present, real or fictional, if you want, who in your opinion would perfectly embody leadership, who would that person be and why?
I'm laughing because I want to say something really smart and like academic. And, I was like, I'm a big fan of Obama, but I'm going to be honest with you. My wife and I, in our downtime, we watch a show called Below the Deck, and it's about crew in a luxury yacht. And they have one called the Mediterranean. And there's this female captain, Captain Sandy, and literally everything that we've talked about today. In terms of what good leaders do, I see her doing. It's TV, right? So I don't know if it's true, but I've seen a lot of other captains don't do what she's doing. She is tuned in. She is encouraging. She knows she's got a $60 million boat she has to steer. She has to worry about her multiple constituents, her passengers who are paying a lot of money, and then the crew members. If they're not happy, they're not serving the passengers. And then she has rough waters, calm waters, all of this stuff. And I feel like she's the great example for me of it can be done. it can be done and you can pay attention to it. And so Captain Sandy, Below the Deck, reality TV. If you can get past like all of the hormonal, folks of different generation, her example of leadership is phenomenal.
Okay.
I wish it was somebody else. Captain Sandy.
No, that's good. That's an interesting one. I've not had that before, and I haven't seen the show, so I can't really comment on.
And I don't get a kickback for people watching this show. I love watching. Like when you do the work that we do, you find examples of excellence everywhere, or you find examples of not being done well. And in the work that I do, I can't help but look. So I find the examples, and even in my leisure time, or leisure, as you might say.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I guess with it being reality TV, you've kind of gone half and half on real or fictitious, haven't you?
Yeah, you don't know. You only know what you see. But I feel like the leadership things that she's doing, the noticing people who are working hard at the individual level, when she's giving correction, when she's had to let people go, I'm like, that really jives to sort of like how I believe it should be done, or how I've done it, or I've seen other people do it well. And I think, it kind of goes back to the challenge of modern leadership is like, we cannot really be everywhere, see everything. How do we have the mechanism in place at the different levels where we know what's really happening? So I think Captain Sandy is sort of a great way to kind of end our discussion. We don't know, we have to verify, but it's my good example of like somebody I really admire.
Cool. Well, I'm going to add that to my watch list. I'm curious now.
You must, but it has to be the Mediterranean one, and it has to be with Captain Sandy because.
Okay.
And then you got to let me know, like hashtag Captain Sandy rocks, hashtag Ron was right.
Yeah. Well, I'll reserve judgment, but yeah.
And that's okay. I'm okay with it.
Awesome. Well, I always give every guest an opportunity at the end if you'd like to point the listeners towards somewhere where they can get your book when it comes out, or your website, or
I would say the easiest one to get the book is Amazon, wherever you get it, whether it's Amazon UK, Amazon.com. It's called Inspire Me. It'll be out no later than the 18th of this month. And if you want to know sort of like how to evaluate the leaders that are reporting to you, if you're a business owner, if you're a multi-unit leader, like it's a great book. If you're a team leader, it teaches you some of the things that we've been talking about, and it does it in a really easy way. There's probably like 109 best practices, and if you're like me, I skip ahead, I skim, and then I come back. Or if you're a reader that likes to kind of go through in detail, I kind of wrote it with both readers in mind. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
No, of course. It's been great talking with you today. Thank you again so much for taking the time out of your early morning.
It's been fantastic. You've been great, and I've enjoyed it. Thank you for what you do. I appreciate you.
Likewise, Ron, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Go get some lunch.
Yeah. Breakfast for you. I know.
Yeah, I will. Yeah. I'm starving.
Have a good day. Cheers.
Right, bye.
Thanks again for your time, Ron. Really great conversation. Thoroughly enjoyed that, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Listeners, if you would like to get a copy of Ron's book or learn more about him, I've put a link in the episode description so you can find that easily. If you want to learn more about leadership and leading with integrity and how I might be able to help you in your journey as a new manager, then there's another website link in the episode description, or alternatively, feel free to find me on LinkedIn and send me a message. I'm more than happy to have a no obligation chat. That's all I've got time for today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you'll join me again next time. And in the meantime, be a leader, not a boss.